Andrew Urquhart with you on this Monday morning. And honestly, I think this is one of the most shocking cases of, not just breaching free speech, but failure of the court system to protect people's freedom. It is the story of a New Zealand journalist. She is of Chinese origin. She took on the Chinese Communist Party and some alleged electoral interference here in New Zealand. And, I'll let Nick Hayne from Free Speech Union explain the rest. Nick, kia ora, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew. It's good to be with you.
This is movie plot stuff, really, in terms of freedom of speech. And can I just start off by saying it's fantastic to have relative freedom of speech here in New Zealand, thanks in part to the good work that you guys do. But compared to what is happening in mainland China, of course, one of the most controlling regimes on the planet, but it seems that the influence of the Chinese Communist Party isn't just restricted to mainland China, but also the New Zealand court system.
Yeah, so, I mean, we've been approached, unfortunately, by someone who's facing the ire, I guess you could say, of those loyal to the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, here in New Zealand. And this Kiwi journalist, her name's Portia Mao. She's well known in the Chinese community, has been a journalist for more than 20 years here in New Zealand, and has really been concerned about the rise of influence on politics and also amongst the Chinese community here, especially in Auckland. And so she's been writing about this and researching, and she's supported Stuff, who did, really in-depth documentary called The Long Game earlier this year. She's also reported on other stories, and she's found herself, to her surprise, subject to an interim order by the District Court in Manukau here in Auckland, where one of her opponents, a guy that she'd actually investigated in the last few years, had gone after her for saying something on a chat forum that he considered to be derogatory.
Yeah.
And so he's objected and got this sort of barring, this ban placed on her under the Harmful Digital Communications Act. And that prevents her from saying anything negative or critical about this man. I mean, it's really draconian, and it totally caught her by surprise. She only found out about it after the order had been delivered by the judge.
There's quite a
so
bit,
she couldn't even defend herself.
Yeah, there's quite a bit to unpack here. I mean, firstly, Harmful Digital Communications Act. Who would have thought that had fishhooks? Okay, we could have spotted that from orbit. However, her not having her day in court. This is the thing which stands out for me. Accusations were brought against her. She only found out that the court had ruled against her after this had happened. Why didn't she have the right to defend? Why didn't she have the opportunity, I should say, to defend herself, Nick?
Well, I mean, you could look at this with great suspicion, but I think it probably comes down to the district court being fairly inept or inefficient. They said that they had emailed her. Turns out they had the wrong email. So she doesn't find out about this ruling against her until she is contacted by a friend who says, hey, did you know that the guy that has been critical of you and that you had an argument with online, he's got this order against you now banning you from saying anything negative about him. And so he posted, in fact, the complainant in this case had posted the interim order online for everyone to see. So he's boasting in the online Chinese community here in Auckland about his win. And so that's the first time she hears about it. She hadn't had a chance, of course, to defend herself in court, and yet somehow she's now subject to a ban, which means that she can be liable for a fine of $5,000 or $20,000 if it's on behalf of sort of some media company and she makes these claims.
So they had the wrong details. They had the wrong
her email address.
Her email address was incorrect. I mean, surely there's ways of checking this. If I have a doctor's appointment, I get like 20 texts and emails from my doctor reminding me to turn up. Maybe my reputation for missing appointments precedes me. I'm not sure. But actually, for something like the district court to have people's accurate information, I don't know. Have they not caught up with? People are doing texts now. You can't necessarily phone them at home on their landline. Is this a glitch in the system, do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of questions I think that need answering here. I mean, we've sent a barrister in now to represent Portia, so she's got someone in her corner. And last Friday they went before a judge, and it's been postponed. Essentially, there's going to be a hearing in March now.
Yep.
But the problem is that this ban, this barring, doesn't just include her saying something negative about this individual. It actually extends to her encouraging anyone else to.
Wow.
So it's really quite sweeping in terms of its power.
So,
and
for example,
we've had objections for a long time about this act.
We're talking about this case now, but it would be problematic if we should mention the person's name. Is that essentially what you're saying here?
Well, I mean, look, we're not worried about our own welfare. To be honest, we're doing this sort of thing day in, day out on behalf of people. But in terms of Portia's case, we don't want to prejudice the case just at the moment. We need to allow it to run its course. But I think there's a bigger principle here beyond actually the name of the complainant, because what we're seeing, and this is not isolated, this guy has done this to another journalist as well, a staff journalist who also happens to be of Chinese origin. And, there is a really sort of determined targeting of people who are speaking up about CCP influence in this country.
Yeah.
So we're really concerned that those few dissidents, those people who are brave enough to speak up and challenge what's going on, they're needing that support from the general public here, because this affects not just the Chinese community in New Zealand, it affects everybody. We've got well-documented cases now, from Jamie Lee Ross, the National MP, who was disgraced after his involvement with certain prominent Chinese individuals who were, given political donations. But we've got that going on. We've also got pro-democracy people from Hong Kong, mainland China, and in the Taiwan independence, leaders as well in this community here, who are trying to be heard, but they are constantly facing harassment, threats of violence. Portia's been threatened with violence and a lot of intimidating tactics as well.
Which is, again, the irony of this, and I understand the thing that she's been charged with, the statement that she made about this individual online. That statement was made about her by this individual. So actually, in terms of what she's being charged with, it's a little bit pot kettle black, really, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's completely one-sided. So technically what happened was they were both in a chat forum, a Chinese chat forum online, and he had been going after her for quite some time, because he was actually investigated by Portia back in 2019 for running in local body elections here in Auckland, in East Auckland. Mm-hmm. Now, she said, look, there are some really suspicious things about this character, and there seem to be very pro-Beijing views, pro-CCP views coming from this candidate. And so she'd investigated him and written about him. And so he's had an axe to grind ever since, it seems. Yeah. And he's consistently gone after her online and trying to discredit her in the Chinese community in Auckland. So it's really, I think a clear case of he's used this term about New Zealand being a lackey to the US. And she, after all of the criticism she's taken from him, has finally snapped back and said, no, you're the lackey of the CCP. Yeah. And the word in question is this phrase or word running dog in Chinese. And so, I mean, it's not actually the world's biggest insult, even in China. Yep. But he's using this claim that he's suffered serious emotional distress, and then he's appealed under this act, the Harmful Digital Communications Act. And got in this order in his favour.
Essentially for having the same term used against him as he used against...
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and so the judge doesn't seem to have taken any of this into consideration. So that's why we're saying this is ludicrous, this type of manipulation of the act.
You would think that, I suppose, it would be the interests of New Zealand to make sure that there isn't foreign interference in our political processes. You would think that it is in the interests of New Zealand for us to have a free and open journalism to be able to investigate such things. It seems like the district court didn't get the memo on either of those things. What next, though? You mentioned that you've taken up the case, you're pushing back on this. What would be an ideal outcome? Nick, what are you hoping for?
Well, obviously, first of all, we want to see Portia, is free of this crazy interim order, which prevents her from speaking up. Because as a journalist, this is her bread and butter. And it's not just that. It's not just about her livelihood. This is about actually preserving the democratic culture in this country, where the fourth estate, the media, can report on things which have enormous national significance if we don't do anything about them. But I mean, beyond that, we think that this particular act, the Harmful Digital Communications Act, which is a relatively recent piece of legislation, we think it was poorly written, and it has not been thought out. And we're beginning to see how it can be used by bad faith, actors in order to advance their kind of, nefarious, political, you name it, kind of ideologies. And so, we really think that the act has to be challenged. We think it's a bad piece of legislation, and it's going to be used like this to, as a coercive measure to stop people from speaking out.
And ironically,
that's crucial.
A piece of legislation designed to prevent online bullying, which, I mean, anybody with good sense says, yes, online bullying is bad, let's do what we can to do this, is being used by an online bully to not just bully, but to gag somebody. Deep irony in this one, and that it gets used for political purposes as well. All sorts of concerns here. Nick, thank you for blowing the whistle and shining the light on this one, and certainly all the best for the court action pushing back. Thanks for keeping us informed. Thanks for joining us today.
No worries. We'll keep you posted. Cheers.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.